The Galactic Concord had ruled the stars for 12 million years. It was a council of 847 different species, each one stranger than the last. Some had wings. Some had tentacles. Some were made of living crystal or floating gas. They came from every corner of the known universe, and they had learned long ago that peace was better than war. On the neutral world of Prime, at the center of the greatest library ever built, stood a monument called the Pillar of Endings. It was black stone, smooth as glass, and it reached so high that clouds formed around its peak. The architects had built it. They were the first intelligent species to ever exist, and they had vanished millions of years before anyone could remember. No one knew where they went. No one knew why they left, but they left warnings. The pillar was covered in writing. Every language that had ever existed was carved into its surface, and every version said the same thing. Ambassador had read the warning 1,000 times. She was an insect-like creature with 4 arms, compound eyes that saw in every direction, and a mind as sharp as broken glass. She had served the conquered for 300 years, and in that time she had seen empires rise and fall. She had watched species destroy themselves with weapons they did not understand. She had helped write treaties that brought peace to worlds that had known only blood. But she did not believe in prophecy. The warning on the pillar was simple. It said, "When the bipeds of the third world from the yellow star arrive, the age of peace ends. They do not conquer, they do not destroy, they adapt, they persist, they become, prepare, or be forgotten." Thought it was nonsense. The architects had been brilliant, yes, but they had also been strange. They left riddles everywhere. Most of them meant nothing. This warning was probably the same. Her aide, a young named Bora, did not agree. "The architects knew things we cannot understand," Bora said one evening as they walked through the archive halls. "They built machines that still work after 10 million years. They mapped the entire universe before any other species learned to make fire. Why would their warning be false?" Clicked her mandibles. It was the way of showing doubt. "Because fear is easy," she said. "It is easy to make others afraid. It is harder to make them wise. The architects were not perfect. They made mistakes like everyone else." "Then why did they disappear?" Bora asked. Had no answer for that. The signal came on a quiet day. Was in her office, reading reports about a trade dispute between 2 minor species, when her communication screen lit up with an urgent message. She opened it and saw the face of Director, a scientist with silver skin and eyes like deep pools of water. "We have detected something," said. His voice was calm, but had known him long enough to see the fear beneath it. "A radio transmission, primitive technology. It came from the outer spiral arm." "Many young species send radio signals," said. "Why is this one special?" Paused, then he said, "It came from the third planet of a yellow star." Felt something cold move through her body. It was not possible. The warning was just words. Old words from a dead species that had vanished before time itself. "Show me," she said. The transmission was crude. It traveled on radio waves, the kind of technology that the conquered had abandoned millions of years ago. But the message was clear. It was a golden disk, launched on a small probe, containing music and mathematics and greetings in dozens of different languages. The species called itself humanity. Watch the images they had sent. Bipeds, 2 arms, 2 legs, soft skin in various shades of brown and pink. They lived on a small blue world covered in water and green plants. They had only recently learned to leave their own planet. They did not have faster-than-light travel. They did not have energy shields or plasma weapons or any of the technologies that defined advanced civilization. They were primitive, weak, fragile. And the architects had warned about them. "This changes nothing," said, but her voice was not as steady as she wanted it to be. "They are young. They have no power. The warning was probably about a different species." "There is no other third planet from a yellow star in that region," said quietly. "We have checked multiple times. This is the species the architects meant." The news spread quickly. Within days, every member of the Conquered knew about humanity. Reactions were mixed. Some species laughed. What could these soft, short-lived creatures possibly do to threaten a coalition that had lasted 12 million years? Others were afraid. The architects had never been wrong before. Their technology still worked perfectly after all this time. Why would their warning be any different? The High Council met on Prime. Representatives from all 847 species gathered in a great hall beneath the Pillar of Endings. Stood at the center, presenting her report. Humanity is not a threat, she said. They have no way to reach us. Their fastest ships would take thousands of years to travel to our nearest outpost. By the time they develop real technology, we will have had centuries to prepare. I recommend we send a message of greeting and offer them provisional membership in the Conquered. A delegate from the collective, a species of reptilian warriors, stood up. His name was, and his voice was like stones grinding together. The architects warned us for a reason. We should destroy them now, while they are weak. Murmurs filled the hall. Some agreed, others were horrified. We do not destroy young species, said firmly. That is not who we are. That is not what the Conquered represents. Then what do you suggest? Demanded. We wait until they grow strong enough to threaten us. Looked up at the Pillar of Endings. The warning glowed faintly in the dim light, carved in a language that no one fully understood anymore. The warning does not say they will conquer us, she said slowly. It does not say they will destroy us. It says they will adapt, they will persist, they will become. She turned back to the council. Perhaps the warning is not about war. Perhaps it is about change. Change is dangerous, said. Change is also necessary, replied. We have ruled the stars for 12 million years. In that time, how much have we truly changed? We are the same as we were 1,000,000 years ago, 10 million years ago. We have grown comfortable. We have grown still. She paused, letting her words settle over the assembly. Perhaps the architects were not warning us about a threat. Perhaps they were warning us about a mirror, a species that would show us what we have forgotten how to be. The council voted. They would not destroy humanity. They would not ignore them either. They would send a delegation, make contact, and offer the young species a place in the Conquered. A controlled place, a contained place. Volunteered to lead the mission. She told herself it was because she wanted to prove the warning wrong. She told herself it was because she was curious. But deep inside, in a place she did not like to look, she knew the truth. She was afraid, not of humanity, but of what humanity might show her about herself. The ship launched 3 days later. It carried gifts and treaties and promises of friendship. It also carried chains, hidden in polite words and careful clauses. The Conquered had survived for 12 million years by controlling what it feared. It did not yet understand that some things could not be controlled. The human ship was small. That was the first thing noticed when it appeared on her. It was barely larger than a shuttle made of metal and ceramic tiles that looked like they might fall apart if someone breathed on them too hard. It had no shields, no weapons that the Conquered sensors could detect. It moved through space on chemical rockets and primitive ion drives, crawling forward like a wounded animal. And yet, somehow, it had traveled further than any human ship had ever gone before. Captain Park stood on the bridge of the United Earth vessel Horizon and watched the alien fleet approach. There were 12 ships, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. They were beautiful in a way that made his chest hurt. Smooth curves, lights that pulsed like heartbeats, technology so advanced that it looked like magic. He was 43 years old. He had gray hair at his temples and lines around his eyes from squinting at star charts for too many years. He had a daughter back on Earth who was probably worried about him. He had a wife who had died 5 years ago and whose picture he kept in his pocket. He was the first human being to meet an alien species. No pressure. "They're hailing us," said Lieutenant from her station. She was young, brilliant, and completely terrified. Her specialty was the study of alien languages. She had spent her entire career preparing for this moment. Now that it was here, she felt like a child pretending to be an adult. The translation software is working. Mostly. Put it through, said. The flickered. An insect-like creature appeared, with 4 arms and eyes that seemed to see everything at once. It wore robes of deep purple, and its mandibles clicked when it spoke. I am ambassador of the Imperium, representative of the Galactic Concord. We come in peace to welcome you to the community of intelligent species. Took a breath. He had practiced this moment 100 times. He had memorized speeches written by poets and politicians and philosophers. But now, standing here, looking at a creature from another world, all those words seemed wrong. So he said the only thing that felt true. Thank you, we've been waiting a long time to meet you. The negotiations took place on ship. Brought and 3 other crew members. They walked through corridors made of materials they could not name, past windows that showed stars in colors humans had never seen. Everything was strange. Everything was wonderful. Everything was slightly terrifying. The conquered delegation consisted of 5 species. Led them, calm and patient and impossible to read. There was a scientist who seemed to study the humans like they were interesting insects. A warrior who watched them with obvious suspicion. 2 other species that could not identify, one that looked like a floating cloud of light and another that resembled a walking tree. They sat in a room that adjusted its shape to fit everyone. Chairs formed from the floor. Tables rose from nothing. The walls displayed images of the galaxy, vast and beautiful and full of life. We offer humanity provisional membership in the Galactic Concord, said. This is a great honor. It means you will have access to our knowledge, our trade networks, and our protection. Nodded, and what do we offer in return? Your cooperation, said. Your willingness to follow our laws and respect our boundaries. Your acceptance of your place in the galactic community. Was reading the treaty document on her. It was long. Thousands of pages of legal language translated into English. Most of it seemed reasonable. Trade agreements, cultural exchanges, technology sharing programs. But then she found the clause. It was buried deep in the document, hidden among technical terms and diplomatic language. But the meaning was clear. Humanity would not be allowed to develop faster-than-light travel independently. They would not be allowed to expand beyond their solar system without permission. Any new technologies would need to be approved by a Concord Oversight Committee. The treaty was not an invitation, it was a cage. Leaned close to and whispered what she had found. She watched his face carefully, looking for shock or anger, but his expression did not change. He simply nodded as if he had expected something like this all along. Ambassador, he said, his voice calm and pleasant, I have a question about Section 47, Paragraph 12. His compound eyes shifted slightly. It might have been surprise, it might have been concern. With an alien face, it was impossible to tell. Of course, what is your question? This clause would prevent humanity from developing our own faster-than-light technology. It would keep us trapped in our solar system unless you give us permission to leave. Smiled. It was a gentle smile, the kind a father might give to a child who had done something foolish. Why would you want that? The room grew quiet. The warrior shifted in his seat. The scientist suddenly became very interested in his own notes. Clicked her mandibles. It is for your protection. Faster-than-light travel is dangerous. Many young species have destroyed themselves by expanding too quickly. We are trying to help you avoid their mistakes. I see, said, and if we refuse? Then you remain outside the Concord, alone, without our protection or our guidance. Thought about this. He thought about his daughter who dreamed of seeing other stars. He thought about his wife who had spent her life studying the sky, always wondering what was out there. He thought about the golden disk on Voyager, launched 40 years before he was born, carrying a message of hope into the darkness. Humanity had always reached for things beyond its grasp. That was what made them human. "We decline," he said. The silence was so complete that could hear his own heartbeat. "You decline," repeated as if she had not understood the words. "We decline the treaty as written. We are happy to negotiate a new agreement, one that treats us as partners rather than children to be managed." Stood up. His crew stood with him. "We did not cross the empty space between stars to be put in a box. We came here to shake hands, to learn, to grow. If you cannot accept that, then we will grow on our own." The warrior made a sound that might have been laughter. "You have nothing, no fleet, no weapons, no technology that could challenge even our smallest ship. What will you do alone?" Looked at the warrior. He was not afraid. He had spent his whole life not being afraid of bigger, stronger things. Fear was a luxury that humans had never been able to afford. "We will do what we always do," he said. "We will survive, we will adapt, we will find a way. And one day when you need help, we will be there. Not because you asked us to be, but because that is who we are." He walked toward the door. His crew followed, did not try to stop them. At the threshold, paused and looked back. "We received your message 50 years ago, the one that told us we were not alone in the universe. Do you know what we did?" Shook her head slowly. "We cried," said, "not from fear, from joy, because we had spent thousands of years looking up at the stars, hoping someone was out there, hoping we were not alone, and finally, we knew that we were not." He smiled again, and this time there was something sad in it. "I hope one day you remember what that feels like." The door closed behind him. Sat in the empty room for a long time after the humans left. She thought about the warning on the pillar. She thought about what it said. She thought about a species that would rather face the darkness alone than accept chains wrapped in kindness. They adapt, they persist, they become. For the first time in 300 years, Ambassador of the Imperium was not sure what was going to happen next. And for the first time in 300 years, that uncertainty felt like hope. 50 years changed everything. The conquered scientists said it was impossible. Faster-than-light travel required understanding physics that humanity would not discover for another 1,000 years. The equations were too complex. The energy requirements were too vast. The technology was beyond them. Humanity did not care about impossible. A young physicist named Jinnah was working in a small laboratory on Earth's moon when she made the discovery. She was not looking for faster-than-light travel. She was trying to solve a problem with energy storage. But she noticed something strange in her equations, a wrinkle in the math that should not have been there. Other scientists would have dismissed it as an error. Jinnah followed it. 3 years later, humanity had its first jump drive. The Concorde's method of faster-than-light travel involved bending space, folding it like paper so that two distant points touched. It was elegant. It was refined. It had been used for 10 million years without significant improvement. Humanity's method was different. The jump drive did not bend space. It punched through it. It tore a hole in reality, pushed the ship through the gap, and let the universe heal behind it. It was violent. It was messy. It worked. The Concorde watched with something between amazement and horror as human ships began appearing throughout the galaxy. They were not conquerors. They were not warriors. They were traders and explorers and settlers, spreading out across the stars like seeds carried by wind. They made friends with species that the Concorde had abandoned. Primitive cultures that had been deemed too young for contact suddenly found human ships landing on their worlds, offering trade and knowledge and partnership. The old boundaries that the Concorde had maintained for millions of years began to blur and shift. Admiral had spent her entire career preparing for war with enemies that never came. She was 61 years old, with silver hair cut short and a scar across her jaw from a pirate attack 20 years ago. She commanded the Third Fleet, 47 ships that represented humanity's growing power in the galaxy. She had never lost a battle. She had also never faced anything truly dangerous. That changed on a quiet Tuesday morning. The distress call came from the edge of conquered space. A research station had detected something emerging from the void between galaxies, something vast, something wrong. They called it the Hollow. Watched the sensor data on her bridge and felt her blood turn cold. The Hollow was not a ship. It was not a creature. It was an absence, a place where reality simply stopped working. Stars that touched it went dark. Planets crumbled to dust. Light itself bent away from it, as if the universe was trying to pretend it did not exist. It was larger than a solar system. It moved slowly but steadily toward the heart of conquered space, and nothing could stop it. The Conquered's greatest fleets attacked first. Ships that had dominated the galaxy for millions of years fired weapons of unimaginable power, energy beams that could crack planets in half, missiles that exploded with the force of dying stars, technologies so advanced that humanity could barely understand them. None of it worked. The weapons passed through the Hollow without effect. Ships that got too close simply stopped existing. One moment they were there, the next they were gone, erased from reality like words wiped from a page. Fleet after fleet fell. The Conquered, which had ruled the stars for 12 million years, had no answer to something that did not obey the rules of the universe. Received the second distress call 3 weeks later, that was directly in the Hollow's path. Billions of people would die. Ambassador herself was still on the surface, refusing to evacuate until everyone else was safe. "They're asking for help," said Commander Shin, her second-in-command. He was young, only 35, but he had proven himself in a dozen battles. Any species capable of responding. "And who is responding?" asked. Hesitated. "No one, Admiral. The remaining conquered fleets have retreated to protect their own. The collective is fortifying their borders. Everyone else is running." Looked at the tactical display. The Hollow was a black spot on the screen, growing larger every hour. There was a tiny blue dot directly in its path. "How many ships do we have?" 47, Admiral, all combat ready." 47 ships against something that had destroyed hundreds of thousands. 47 small human vessels against a wound in reality itself. It was suicide. Everyone on the bridge knew it. No one said it. Thought about her granddaughter, who had just turned 12. She thought about the home she had built on a small human colony near the galactic rim. She thought about all the things she would never see, all the moments she would never have. Then she thought about who had treated humanity with suspicion and fear for 50 years. She thought about Ambassador, who had tried to put her people in a cage because she was afraid of what they might become. She thought about what kind of species humanity wanted to be. Set course for the Z. Stared at her. "Admiral, with all respect, this is not our fight. The Conquered never helped us. They tried to contain us. Why should we die for them?" Turned to face her crew. They were young, most of them. They had families. They had futures. And they were looking at her with eyes that held a question she had to answer. 40,000 years ago," she said, "our ancestors lived in caves. They had nothing but stone tools and fire. The world was full of things that wanted to kill them, predators with claws and teeth, whether that could freeze them solid, diseases they did not understand. By every measure, they should have died." She paused, letting the silence fill the bridge. But they did not die, they kept going. When the cold came, they found warmth. When the predators attacked, they fought back. When one path closed, they found another. They crossed frozen wastelands and burning deserts and oceans that seemed to go on forever, not because they were strong, not because they were fast, but because they refused to give up. Looked at the tactical display again. The Hollow waited, vast and terrible and patient. The Conquered ruled this galaxy for 12 million years by being careful, by avoiding danger, by staying safe. And now something has come that all their caution cannot stop. She stood, her shoulders squared. "We are not careful. We are not safe. We are human, and humans show up. She turned back to, set course for the maximum speed, and get me a channel to every ship in the fleet. The channel opened. 47 ships waited for her words. This is Admiral. In 3 hours we will engage an enemy that cannot be defeated by any weapon we possess. The conquered has abandoned their own people. We are all that remains. Some of you will not survive. I cannot promise victory. I cannot promise survival. I can only promise that when the history of this galaxy is written, they will say that humanity stood. She took a breath. They will say that we showed up. The fleet jumped. Behind them, 1,000 conquered ships watched from safe distance, unable to believe what they were seeing. A species that had only discovered faster-than-light travel 50 years ago was flying into the mouth of oblivion. And they were not afraid. The was burning when the human fleet arrived. Engineer Specialist pressed her face against the observation window and watched the chaos below. Great cities that had stood for millions of years were crumbling. Ships by the thousands fled toward the stars, carrying refugees away from the approaching darkness. And behind it all, visible even from orbit, was the hollow. It was not just darkness. It was the absence of everything. Looking at it hurt in a way that could not describe, like staring at a wound in the fabric of existence. She was 34 years old. She had spent her career studying things that should not work. She had a reputation among human scientists for being brilliant and slightly mad. When other engineers said something was impossible, usually found a way to make it happen anyway. But this was different. This was not just difficult. This was something that broke the rules of reality itself. The battle had already begun by the time reached the engineering bay. The fleet was engaging the hollow's outer tendrils, the parts of it that reached out like fingers grasping for stars. Human weapons were useless. Missiles exploded and achieved nothing. Energy beams passed through empty space. The hollow did not notice them. Admiral's voice came over the ship's communication system. All ships, maintain defensive formation. Keep the evacuation corridor open. Buy as much time as possible. Buy time. That was all they could do. Hold the line while transports carried people away from certain death. Watched the tactical display and saw human ships falling one by one. The hollow did not attack. It simply moved forward, and anything that touched it ceased to exist. The cruiser Soul's Promise took position at the front of the formation. It was Admiral's flagship, the largest vessel in the human fleet, and it drew the hollow's attention like a candle drawing moths. Tendrils of nothingness reached for it. The ship dodged, barely. Engineering teams, Admiral's voice said, I need options. Anything. Weapons, shields, tactics, something that can hurt this thing or slow it down. Stared at her console. Around her, other engineers were running calculations, testing theories, and coming up with nothing. The hollow existed outside normal physics. You could not fight something that did not follow the same rules you did. Unless you changed the rules. The idea came to her suddenly, like lightning in a dark sky. It was insane. It probably would not work. And even if it did work, there was a very good chance it would kill everyone. She ran to the communication panel. Admiral, this is Engineer on the carrier. I have an idea. There was a pause, then, I'm listening. The hollow exists outside normal space. That's why our weapons do not affect it. It is not really here. It is somewhere else, pressing against reality like a hand pressing against glass. Was talking fast, her words tumbling over each other. We cannot fight it here, but we might be able to push it somewhere else. A place where it cannot touch us. Where? Nowhere, literally nowhere. A null dimension. A mathematical space that exists between zero and nothing. Pulled up her calculations and sent them to the flagship. If we can generate a field that creates a temporary null space and collapse the hollow into it, we can trap it forever. It will exist in a place that does not exist. It will be gone. Another pause, longer this time. Could imagine Admiral looking at her equations, trying to understand them. Can you build this device? Looked around the engineering bay. She saw spare parts from a dozen different systems. She saw tools and cables and things that were never meant to be used together. She thought about the jump drive sitting in the ship's heart, the machine that tore holes in reality every time they traveled faster than light. Yes, she said, I can build it from a jump drive, some fusion cores, and other things. How long? 2 hours. Maybe less if I do not sleep or eat or think about how insane this is. You have 90 minutes out. The next 90 minutes were the longest of life. She worked like a woman possessed, her hands moving without thought, her mind racing through calculations that should have taken weeks. Other engineers helped when they could and stayed out of the way when they could not. The device grew piece by piece, a collection of parts that looked more like art than science. Outside, the battle raged. Ships fell. The hollow moved closer. The evacuation continued, but not fast enough. There were still millions of people on the surface. Captain Park Menu commanded the destroyer. He was 38, the grandson of Park, the man who had first refused the Conquered's chains. He had grown up on stories of humanity's place in the galaxy, of the species that chose to stand alone rather than kneel. Now he watched the hollow approaching, and he knew that his ship could not survive much longer. Engineering status report. Hull integrity at 40%. Shields are gone. We have maybe 2 direct hits left before we break apart. Menu looked at the tactical display. The Soul's promise was falling back, buying time for to finish her work. But the hollow was moving faster now, as if it sensed that something was happening. Its tendrils were reaching for the flagship. If the Soul's promise fell, the device would never be finished. Everything would be lost. Helm, Menu said, set collision course for the nearest tendril. His crew stared at him. Sir, we are going to ram that thing, full speed, all power to engines. Menu stood up from his chair. Anyone who wants to leave, the escape pods are ready. No one will think less of you. No one moved. Menu smiled. It was a sad smile, the kind that came from knowing exactly what was about to happen and accepting it anyway. It has been an honor serving with you, all of you. The accelerated. It shot forward like a spear, cutting through space toward the tendril that was reaching for the flagship. Menu watched the distance counter fall, watched the blackness grow larger in the... At the last moment, he thought of his grandfather. He thought of the words Park had spoken 50 years ago, when he refused to be contained. We will find a way, that is who we are. The struck the tendril and exploded. The blast did nothing to the hollow itself, but the shockwave pushed it back just for a moment, just enough. The Soul's promise escaped. The tendrils. Menu was gone, but he had bought them 10 more minutes. On the finished her device. It was ugly. It was cobbled together from spare parts and desperate hope. One of the components was the timer from a coffee machine, because she had needed something that could count down precisely to the millisecond. It's ready, she said into her communicator. But I need to be within 1 kilometer of the hollow's core to activate it. Any further and the field will not be strong enough. That's suicide, Admiral said. Probably, but it is the only way. There was a long silence. Then, I'm coming to get you, we'll make the run together. The Soul's promise broke formation and accelerated toward the hollow's heart, transferred to the flagship in a shuttle that barely survived the crossing. She stood on the bridge beside Admiral as the ship dove into darkness. The hollow was all around them. Reality twisted and bent. The showed things that should not exist, colors that had no names, shapes that hurt to perceive. Activating device, said. Her hands were steady. Her voice was calm. Field generating in 30 seconds. The ship shuddered. Metal screamed. Part of the hull simply vanished, erased from existence. 20 seconds. More ships were falling. The human fleet was dying to keep the corridor open. to give them these precious moments. 10 seconds. Admiral looked at. If this does not work, I want you to know that I am proud of you. I am proud of all of us. Smiled, it will work. We are human. We always find a way. Activating now. Reality screamed. The hollow collapsed, not destroyed, removed, pulled into a space that had not existed until that moment, a mathematical nothing that swallowed it whole. The universe healed around the wound, closing the gap, making it as if the hollow had never been. The soul's promise emerged from the darkness, battered and broken but alive. 23 human ships remained out of 47. Behind them, the still burned. But it survived. And humanity had done the impossible. Again. 1 year after the Battle of, Ambassador returned to the Pillar of Endings. She walked slowly through the great archive, her 4 legs carrying her with less strength than they once had. The past year had aged her. The destruction of her great cities, the loss of millions of her people, the knowledge that everything she had believed about the galaxy had been wrong. But she was not here to mourn. She was here to understand. The pillar stood as it always had, black stone reaching toward the sky, covered in warnings written by beings who had vanished before memory began. Had read those warnings 1,000 times. She had dismissed them as myth. She had been so certain that she understood what they meant. She had understood nothing. "You come here often now," said a voice behind her. Turned. Director Sora stood at the entrance to the chamber, silhouetted against the light from outside. She was young for a human ambassador, only 42, with kind eyes and a smile that seemed to come easily. She had been appointed as humanity's first official representative to the Conquered 3 months ago. Had not been certain what to expect from her. Humans were strange creatures. They lived such short lives, barely a century if they were lucky, and yet they seemed to pack more experience into those years than they did in 300. They were soft and fragile and slow, and they had saved the galaxy. "I come here to think," said, "to remember, to try to understand what the architects were trying to tell us." Sora walked into the chamber, her footsteps echoing on the ancient floor. She looked up at the pillar with an expression that could not quite read, wonder, perhaps, or sadness. With humans, it was often both at the same time. "My grandmother used to tell me stories," Sora said. "She grew up in a small village in the mountains, in a country called Korea. Every winter, the elders would gather the children and tell them tales about the old days, about monsters that lived in the forests and spirits that walked the rivers." Clicked her mandibles. What does this have to do with the pillar? The monsters in those stories were never just monsters. They were warnings. They taught children to be careful, to respect nature, to stay together when danger came. Sora reached out and touched the ancient stone. The architects were not trying to scare you. They were trying to prepare you. "Prepare us for what? For you?" Sora was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "The Conquered ruled this galaxy for 12 million years. You built an empire of peace and order and careful control. You decided which species could advance and which must be contained. You managed everything, controlled everything, because you were afraid of chaos." Wanted to argue. She wanted to say that the Conquered had done what was necessary, that control was the only way to prevent destruction. But the words died in her throat. She had seen too much in the past year. She had watched her own world burn because the Conquered's careful plans had no answer for something truly unexpected. "The architects saw us coming," Sora continued. "Not because we were dangerous, but because we were different. We do not follow rules the same way you do. We adapt. We change. We refuse to accept that anything is impossible, and when we become part of something, we change it. We cannot help it." She turned to face. Her eyes were gentle but firm. "The age of peace you knew is over. But it was not real peace. It was stagnation dressed in comfortable clothes. You stopped growing millions of years ago. You found a system that worked, and you held onto it so tightly that you forgot how to let go. "And you think you can do better?" asked. There was no anger in her voice, only exhaustion and something that might have been hope. "I think we can do better together," Sora said. "Humans and all the species that the conquered contained and all the species that the conquered abandoned. We do not want to rule you. We do not want to replace you. We want to stand beside you and face whatever comes next." Looked at the pillar again. The warning that had haunted her for 300 years seemed different now. Not a threat, not a prophecy of destruction, a promise of change. "They adapt, they persist, they become." "Your admiral," said slowly, "she is recovering." Slowly. "The doctors say she will walk again in a few months. She is already complaining about the hospital food and asking when she can return to her ship." Despite everything, felt something that might have been a smile. "She is a remarkable woman, as was your Captain Park, who flew his ship into the darkness so that others could live." Minyu would have been embarrassed by the praise. He always said he was just doing what any human would do. Sora paused. "I think that is the part you do not understand. What he did was not exceptional for us. It was normal. Humans have always been willing to sacrifice for others. It is woven into our nature." "Why?" asked. "You live such short lives, every year is precious. Why would you throw it away for strangers?" Sora thought about the question. She thought about her grandmother's stories, about the village in the mountains, about all the generations of humans who had lived and died and passed their wisdom to the next. "Because we remember," she said finally. "We remember everyone who came before us, every sacrifice, every act of courage, every moment when someone chose to stand instead of run, and we want to be worthy of them. We want the people who come after us to remember us the same way." She looked at the pillar one last time. "The architects warned you about us because they knew we would change everything, and we have. The old conquered is gone. The age of control and containment is over," she smiled. "But something new is beginning, something better, and this time we are building it together." In the months that followed, the galaxy transformed. Species that had been contained for millions of years were welcomed into a new alliance. Technologies that had been forbidden were shared freely. The old laws, written in fear and suspicion, were replaced by new ones built on trust and cooperation. Humans spread across the stars, not as conquerors or rulers, but as partners and friends. They made mistakes. They learned from them. They kept going. Ambassador retired from diplomatic service and spent her remaining years writing a history of the change she had witnessed. Her book became required reading for young diplomats throughout the galaxy. She died peacefully at the age of 412, surrounded by friends from a dozen different species. Admiral returned to command the fleet she had nearly died leading. She spent the rest of her career training the next generation of officers, teaching them that strength came not from weapons or shields, but from the courage to stand when standing seemed impossible. Engineer was awarded every scientific honor the galaxy had to offer. She accepted them politely and went back to her laboratory, where she continued studying things that should not work. She was last seen trying to build a machine that could talk to other dimensions. And on Prime, at the base of the Pillar of Endings, a new message was carved into the ancient stone. It was written in human characters, translated into 1,000 languages, placed directly beneath the architect's warning. It said, "We came, we stayed, and together we became something new." The architects had been right, thought as she read those words for the last time. They had seen humanity coming millions of years before they arrived. They had known that everything would change. But they had not known what that change would bring. They could not have imagined that the species they warned about would be the same species that saved the galaxy, that the chaos they feared would become the foundation of something stronger than the old order had ever been. Humanity was strange, humanity was reckless, humanity was impossible. And the galaxy was better for it. Above the pillar, the stars burned on, bright and eternal, watching over a universe that had finally learned to grow again. Somewhere out there, beyond the edge of known space, new wonders waited to be discovered. New friends waited to be made. New challenges waited to be overcome. And humanity would be there. They always showed up. That was who they were.